Greetings everyone. So, this is Pagir History, Pagir Varalaru. We have started a new series in as part of Pagir team. Pagir team has started a new series. So, before telling about what is Pagir Varalaru or Pagir History, let me briefly introduce you to Pagir. It started some 6-7 years back by a group of young students from Chennai, basically from Loyola and Madras Christian College. Like we are all students there. We were all students there a few years back. Then we were all interested in history, politics, literature, art, and culture. So our passion towards these things united us. So then, when we thought of rather than just like talking about these stuffs among ourselves, we wanted to share these things with wide of other range of people, other people. So for that, like we started a YouTube channel first, and it is still there, where we introduce movies, books, our commentary on contemporary social happenings. So it's a YouTube channel that we started back then. And journalist Nyani, who passed away, he was the one who gave us the title actually, Pagir. If you're starting an initiative like this, then you can have the title Pagir. So he was the one who gave us this name to us. So then initially we were like running this YouTube channel. Then during COVID time, we converted this YouTube channel into an online platform using Google Meet and Zoom meeting. So where like we had like every Saturday and every Thursday, we had meetings on literature and other sorts of things like on art, ecology, history, on a lot of other things. We had two meetings every week during COVID time, and we had lot of people coming in, being part of Pagir during the entire lockdown time actually. So after that, we took a small break. Then we occasionally have some public events online. So when on issue based actually, whenever we find that okay on certain issues, it is necessary to hold a meeting, necessary to communicate our perspective. Then on some Saturdays, we have our own program. We schedule our own programs. So that is how it's going on. And me and Bharati, we both are like PhD scholars from Delhi. Me from Ambedkar University and Bharati from Ashoka. So we are very passionate about history, and we thought the dialogue about history shouldn't confine within the academic spaces. It shouldn't confine within the classrooms. So we wanted what is being produced in academic spaces. It should reach wide range of audiences. It should reach the readers, the masses. So we want to like take the history to the public, popularize it. So it's one of our vision, ambition. So it's part of this Pagir history, Pagir Varalaru. It is part of that ambition that we both share to popularize histories written by scholars. So we, as a part of that larger project, through this series, we thought of like starting a interview series, interview with the scholars who worked on Tamil Nadu history, on various aspects of Tamil history, both in English and in Tamil. So we have already taken an interview of K.A. Manikumar, so who wrote Murder in Mudugulathur, and the interview is already there on YouTube. So this is our second interview, and we have Professor Ravi Vaithees with us. So we are going to take his interview about his works and all. We are going to have a dialogue with him. So, and we will try to do it with several other authors. Apart from interview, we are going to also have some podcast series where we'll be talking about the historical controversies, debate that is happening in the public right now. So both in Tamil Nadu as well as in other part of Indian subcontinent, different controversies centering around history. We're going to have a smile of podcast series on that. Then we will be like having other videos and podcast introducing historical movies, historical books, historical fiction, and other things. So that's the larger project. So now I call Bharati to introduce Professor Ravi Vaithees and his work, and what this particular interview is going to all about. So Bharati.
Uh, Thanks a lot, Arun. Hello, everyone, and we are very happy to be joined by Professor Ravi Vaithees. So, a short introduction on Professor Ravi Vaithees. He's currently a senior scholar and former associate professor of modern South Asian and world history at the University of Manitoba. It's in Canada, where he has been teaching for the past 15 years. Before that, he was working in the University of Toronto, from where he received his PhD. Also, he did his masters also there. His primary research interest has been on the subject of religion, caste, gender, and its intersections with ethno-national and nationalist articulation in both colonial and post-colonial South Asia. He has also worked on the left movements in South India and Sri Lanka. So his most important work and the work that we are going to discuss today is Religion, Caste and Nation in South India, Maraimalai Adigal, Neo-Saivite Movement and Tamil Nationalism, 1876 to 1950. And in Tamil, he has co-edited with Stanislas. It's titled Navina Tamilakam Moli Madam Adayalam. So his publications are wide ranging, actually, from left movement in Sri Lanka to Neo-Saivite movement in Tamil. So we are very happy in engaging with him. So this particular work, which we are going to discuss today, Religion, Caste and Nation in South India, uh, is a work on the pioneer Tamil Saivite ideologue, Maraimalai Adigal. Ravi Vaithees' initial work was with regards to understanding religio-cultural roots of modern nationalism and Dravidian ideology in South India. He has worked on, Caldwell. He has worked on missionaries and their relationship with Dravidian ideology. So, a short introduction on Maraimalai Adigal. He has lived between the time of 1876 to 1950. He's popularly known as the father of pure Tamil movement. He is an important figure in the Neo-Saivite movement also. He played a very important role in, anti-Hindi agitations. He wanted to purify Tamil from the influence of Sanskrit and other foreign languages. He worked closely, along with contradictions, with many figures during this era. Many popular figures during this era, from V.O. Chidambaram Pillai Tiruvika to Periyar of self-respect movement and Dravidian movement. He is deemed as an inspiration for Tamil nationalism. He published many works on Tamil history, where he reinterpreted Tamil history from and it displaced Tamil history from Aryan Brahminism. So his work is regarded a classic in the Tamil nationalist circles, and popularly, out of his respect for Tamil devotion slash Tamil Patru, he changed his name from Swami Vedachalam to Maraimalai Adigal. So he was running an organization called as Saiva Siddhanta Mahasamajam, and he was a follower of Vallalar, who, recently his 200th anniversary also came about. Samarasa Suddha Sanmarga Sangam. He changed its name in Tamil to Podunalai Kazhagam. So the book mainly argues that we can find the roots of Dravidian nationalism or Dravidian movement, which is regarded as a secular and atheist movement. The roots of this movement is, in a religious association and religious understanding of Neo-Saivism. So Neo-Saivism as a philosophy and as a movement seeks to install Saivism or Saiva Siddhanta as against the Brahminical religion of the Aryans or Brahmins. It seeks to portray a new Tamil culture devoid of Brahminical or Sanskritic or Aryan influence. And Maraimalai Adigal is one of the most central figures in this regard. So the echoes of this can be heard in the writings of all major Tamil or Dravidian nationalist circles, from Manonmani P. Sundaram Pillai to Bharatidasan and to C.N. Annadurai. So this work opened up previously obscured history of the intellectual and ideological roots of modern Tamil identity and nationalism, but it also reveals an intimate connection between the relationship between religion and the secular, religion and atheism, religion making and nationalist and ethno-nationalist projects in South Asia. So it is a very important contribution, and we are very happy to have Professor Ravi Vaithees here. Hello, sir. How are you doing? Sir, you're on mute. 1 second. Yeah,
Well,
you're on mute. So how are you doing, sir?
well, thank you. Very well. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to have you in this interview, sir. And my first question would be regarding your journey, be it academic or personal. You're from Sri Lanka. You went to Toronto University to pursue your masters. Initially, you did the BSc, and then you went to Toronto University to pursue your masters and continued doing your PhD there. So your master's thesis is on Robert Caldwell, and your dissertation, PhD dissertation, was on Maraimalai Adigal. So could you recount your journey there, from Sri Lanka to Toronto University, and how you found, Caldwell initially? Then we'll move on to Maraimalai Adigal.
Okay. Thank you. I must say, that was a very fine introduction you gave to the book, and basically a very good description of much of the book, or the arguments of much of the book. Yeah, and coming to your question, I came to history quite late, and I guess during the time I was getting interested in history, it was at the same time as the ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka was getting even more severe, and questions about Tamil nationalism was, I guess, in the back of my mind. And after my while I was doing my master's, I sort of stumbled upon Caldwell, whose major work, Comparative Grammar of South Indian or Dravidian Family of Languages, really struck me as not just a philological work, but it was almost a call to arms for the so-called non-Brahmin Tamilians. And so I got interested in that. And this was the time when Edward Said's work on Orientalism, theoretical trends at the time, played a very powerful role in the humanities, in different fields, from history, anthropology, to political science, and I don't know whether you're familiar with Said's work on Orientalism, but basically he came up with this argument that you cannot divorce knowledge from power, and that much of colonial knowledge forms on India cannot be divorced from, the fact that the British were ruling India at the time, and the Christian missionaries also had an agenda. And so I started looking at Caldwell's work in that light, and his sort of objective study of South Indian languages, in a way, basically, I think he was challenging the extant knowledge at the time that assumed that all languages in India came from the Indo-Aryan family of languages, and he was contesting that and saying South Indian languages are from an entirely different family, and that Tamil is the root language of that, and so on and so forth. So I wanted to do a kind of in-depth study of that, and saw in it almost an invitation for the non-Brahmin Tamils to take up this knowledge, to contest Sanskrit Aryan influences, supposed Sanskrit Aryan influences in South India. So that was my work on what I did for my master's, and I published that in 1996 in the Journal of South Indian Studies that Mrs. Pandian had founded. Yeah, okay. I think I'm back to you.
Right. No, that's very interesting answer. But how from Caldwell to Maraimalai Adigal, and better part of your life has been dedicated on your research on Maraimalai Adigal. Could you recount that journey from Caldwell to Maraimalai Adigal, and what inspired you to do a research on Maraimalai Adigal? Why him, and not anybody?
That's an interesting question. Thinking back, his writing really struck me as a very powerful statement of Tamil identity and nationalism. He was like the most nationalist Tamil at the time in terms of his writing. he made it out that the Tamils are have the greatest civilization, a very proud literary tradition. They were the ancient people of India, in fact, and basically, arguing along with, obvious Caldwell's influence that they were such a great civilization that had been kind of the glory diminished by the incoming Aryan influences, and he made a powerful case, and I think that's what, and also he was anti-caste, anti-Aryan Brahmin, and all this. I guess that attracted me. Yeah, and obviously, as you said in the introduction, as the father of the pure Tamil movement, he was the most powerful figure advocating the writing of pure Tamil, right? As he changed his name itself from Vedachalam Pillai to Maraimalai Adigal.
Yeah.
And,
So,
and if I can go on, maybe anticipating your next question, when I started working on Maraimalai Adigal for my PhD thesis, I realized there were already about 10, 20 biographies of him already out there. And largely they, portrayed him as a champion of, like the original champion of the writing in pure Tamil. And from a very fairly secular perspective, that he was doing this as a champion of the Tamil language, and his language purism was undiluted. He was very, he exerted a powerful influence in that way. But there was no connection. How did he come to that? So my historical research, my sort of detailed historical work, made me realize that, his work on the Tamil language, or his outspoken fight for the Tamil language, was very much connected to his role as a Saiva Siddhanta or Saivite revivalist. And that really gave me a lot of theoretical problems. How does it make sense? I mean, I started working on a figure who was a great fighter for the Tamil language, and as you know, against Sanskritic influences and the Aryan, so-called Aryan Brahmin influences. But how did he come to this? And basically, my research started unraveling and opening up all the connections at that time, that historical period, and what led him to this.
great, sir. So, as you have mentioned, Maraimalai Adigal, apart from his contribution or his work on this pure Tamil movement, launching pure Tamil movement, he is known as a Shaivite revivalist, a Neo-Saivite. So the next question is on this aspect basically. So what is so new about Neo-Saivism? So
Sorry, what?
Shaivism is know about Neo-Saivism. So Saivism as a religion or a sect for a quite long time in Indian subcontinent as well as Tamil country. So what are the continuities and discontinuities between the Shaivism that belong to the ancient and medieval Tamil country, and then this Neo-Saivism? This what is the difference? Continuities, discontinuities? Yeah.
So no, that's a very good question. See, at first, I mean, I think most scholars of history or religion have seen Saivism, as you say, even in contemporary times, as something that is unchanging and continuous, is a continuous tradition, at least from the medieval period up to now. But as I said again, once I started investigating the life history of Maraimalai Adigal and how he came to this, to be regarded as the father of the pure Tamil movement. If you look at his early background and how he came to even write in Tamil or publish in Tamil, you see that at least from the age of 15, he came under the influence of a major Saiva Siddhanta revivalist at the time, Somasundara Nayaka, who was, I guess, in the Tamil Nadu context, as opposed to the Sri Lankan or Jaffna context, was the biggest revivalist, Saiva Siddhanta revivalist of his time. He, Somasundara Nayaka, himself was previously a Vaishnavite and a Vedantist, and he converted halfway during his spiritual journey to Saiva Siddhanta. And at that time, there was a great battle between the pamphlet battles between the Vedantists and the Saiva Siddhantists in Chennai. And Somasundara Nayaka was, on the Saiva Siddhanta side, he was the chief spokesman, and there were others in the Vedantic side. And Maraimalai Adigal came to prominence defending Somasundara Nayaka's battle against the Vedantists. And here, his knowledge, he had started studying Tamil, classical Tamil, from a Tamil teacher in Nagapatnam, a person called Narayanasamy, who was very good in ancient Tamil literature that was just coming to be republished, coming to be known again or rediscovered towards the latter part of the 19th century and early 20th century. So Maraimalai Adigal had a peculiar strength in understanding a lot of this ancient Tamil literature. And he utilized that to defend Somasundara Nayaka's fight against the Vedantists, the Advaita Vedantists, or some would just call it Brahminical Hinduism. So Nayaka basically took him on as a disciple. And it is under Nayaka's, after meeting Nayaka, that he moves from Nagapatnam to Chennai and gets a position as a Tamil Pandit at Madras Christian College. And even earlier than that, actually, he came under the influence of Sundaram Pillai. Sundaram Pillai, as you probably know, was also known as Manonmaniyam Sundaram Pillai, who wrote this famous dramatical work, Manonmaniyam, and part of it is used as a kind of national or regional anthem, Tamil Thai Vanakkam, right? So Sundaram Pillai was one of the most English-educated, highly qualified person at the time, and Maraimalai Adigal, Vedachalam Pillai, as he was known at that time, came under his influence. And Sundaram Pillai also had been very much influenced by the Caldwell's writings, and but Sundaram Pillai was the first one to use Caldwell's writings. Caldwell had said, had praised Tamil and has said Tamil is the root language of all the South Indian languages, but yet he dated it from about 13th century onwards. That in terms of literary heritage, that Tamil language and literature, or Tamil literature, he states it as emerging from the medieval period. What Sundaram Pillai does in this famous essay called The Age of Thirunjana Sambandar, or the History of Tamil Literature, dates Thirunjana Sambandar to the 3rd century and argues that basically corrects Caldwell and says Tamil literary history has a much anterior history, much longer history, and that Tamilians should be proud of. And it's a living language, it's far superior to Sanskrit, and so on and so forth. And basically, coming back to Maraimalai Adigal, who's kind of mentored by Sundaram Pillai. And Sundaram Pillai is also part of this network with Somasundara Nayakar and his Neo-Saivism, or his Saivite revivalism. So early on, basically, Maraimalai Adigal comes under the influence of many of these, what I would call Neo-Saivite figures, like Sundaram Pillai, Somasundara Nayakar, Nallasamy Pillai, who at this time, in the late 1890s, edited the journal Siddhanta Deepika, which is a journal basically promoting Saivism or Saiva Siddhanta and Tamil. At first, both in English and in Tamil. And then the Tamil version was discontinued. So basically, Maraimalai Adigal is adopted or mentored by many of these big figures at the time, and who I would say were largely, I would term them as Neo-Saivites. As Sundaram Pillai argued in his The Age of Thirunjana Sambandar, or the History of Tamil Literature, he says the majority of the people of Tamil Nadu are Tamils, or Saivites, and so basically equating Saivites with Tamilians, right? Although we know there is Vaishnavites in Tamil Nadu, but basically Sundaram Pillai is kind of equating Tamils with Saivites, and contesting the hegemony of Brahmins and Aryans, and this is taken up by Maraimalai Adigal. And so, to answer your question about Saivism has always existed, but this revival that emerged in the late 19th century, contesting Vedantic or pan-Indian Hinduism in the kind of image of Advaita Vedanta, be it Brahmo Samaj, this influence coming down from Calcutta, Arya Samaj's influence. So the Tamil region was putting forth its own kind of Saivite identity as a contesting thing. So, and here I argue that this version of Saivism is a version of Saivism very much influenced by European writings and Orientalist writing, especially this kind of competition between the Aryan and the Dravidian. So it's a kind of all traditions in India were influenced by this Orientalist writing. But in the Tamil case, it imbibes this Caldwellian discourse, and Saiva Siddhanta and Saivism was quite inclusive. Although, if you look at the Saivite canon and the major Saivite saints, the Nalvar, for example, right? Many are Brahmin saints. If you look at the Madams, Tiruvadurai or Dharmapuri or Tirupanandal, it's led by non-Brahmin Malala lineages, but they pay obeisance to the Brahmin saints, and there's a kind of balancing going on in these ashrams that is a little different from what the Neo-Saivites did, influenced very much by the Orientalist discourse that sought to distance or basically produce a kind of racial divide between the Aryan and the Dravidian, right? And so that's why I call Neo-Saivites. And later on, basically we have evidence because there was a group of Saivites who wrote very critically of this Neo-Saivites. And they actually start all the way from Malala to Somasundara Nayakar and call these people not Neo-Saivites, but Tamil Variyar. They're Tamil fanatics. Sort of, trying to sort of say that they are kind of a newly invented bunch of people who have a more of a political agenda than a spiritual one. Have I managed to answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yeah. Very well. Very well. In a very detailed manner, actually. In a detailed manner, yeah. You even answered our follow-up questions, actually. We had other questions in mind, but a lot of things are covered in the single questions, actually. We are so happy about it. Yeah. So, having spoken about Saivite revivalism, Neo-Saivite movement, next we can go to Tani Tamil Iyakkam, the pure Tamil movement. So, where do you find because whenever we talk about Maraimalai Adigal in contemporary Tamil Nadu, more than he is known as a Neo-Saivite or a Saivite revivalist, he is known for pure Tamil movement. Because I am from MCC, Madras College, I studied there. So even there, we have a photograph of Maraimalai Adigal in the Tamil department. So and then he is not remembered now as Saivite revivalist. Actually, I mean at least in some circles, some spaces. So he's popularly known as father of pure Tamil movement. Yes, sir?
Yes, interesting question again.
So the question is about this thing about the question is what is this origin of pure Tamil movement? When did he started it? Maraimalai Adigal started it because there are a lot of legends and stories about it, about how it was founded. This pure Tamil movement. When did it started it? So what are your views on this movement actually? Because you have described about the larger Neo-Saivite world during Maraimalai Adigal time, even before him, there existed a Neo-Saivite world. The impetus of this pure Tamil movement, was it from that Neo-Saivite world, or is it the contribution of Maraimalai Adigal? And what are the impact of the movement he launched? Yeah, this is the question that I want to ask.
Yeah, very good question. I mean, as you know, there is a number of books. Scholars have devoted their entire works to look at the Tani Tamil Iyakkam, the pure Tamil movement, and good scholarly works, covering people even who followed Maraimalai Adigal as the so-called leader of the pure Tamil movement. In my own work, I myself, was asking in hindsight, what was this movement? I don't see much evidence of it in his own writings. Supposed to have started in 1916 by their own narratives, right? At least the narrative, Adigal's own narrative. Incidentally, that's the time when the Justice Party the Non-Brahmin Manifesto was announced, and the Justice Party, the early Justice Party, was founded. Is that a coincidence? My own work, detailed sort of study of Maraimalai Adigal's writings, made me think this happened even earlier. It started, when Somasundara, and to understand this, we have to again go back to Neo-Saivism and the contest between Nayakar and the so-called Aryan editors of the Neo-Vedantic publications, the pamphlet wars that took place in Tamil Nadu in the late 19th century, from the 1860s onwards, and it sort of continued till about the early 1910s, or 1901, around there. In these contests, what was, and some of this, a lot of it is written in a Tamil, which we now call Mani Prabhalam Nadai, a lot of Sanskrit, even Telugu was mixed in the Tamil. Somasundara Nayagar himself was from a Telugu Tamil background. So he uses some Telugu words in his writings. His Tamil is very highly Sanskritized. And that is why he wanted the help of Maraimalai Adigal, who was trained in classical Tamil, the ancient Tamil literature, to back him up. And you can see why, because the contest at hand was, how do you reinterpret the religious works of the Tamils? There was no, is debatable. How do we interpret the Tirukkural? How do we interpret the ancient Tamil poetry? The commentaries to those? How do we interpret? Actually, one of the early wars between Somasundara Nayagar, the Saivite, and the Aryan editors of the Advaita journals was over Tirukkural. And, there were articles written back and forth, like Mudal Kural Vadam, and Mudal Kural Vada Nirakaranam. So what does the issue at hand was, what does Thiruvalluvar mean when he starts his Tirukkural? Is he referring to to a god, to an Aryan god, or a Dravidian god, or a Saivite god, and things like that? And in order to win these battles, you really had to have a good knowledge of Tamil. And Maraimalai Adigal came in very handy in these contests to reinterpret Tamil literature, ancient Tamil literature, be it the Tirukkural, be it Naladiyar, be it Tiruvasagam, Sivapuranam, all these things came for debate, because there's a kind of Vedantic interpretation of it, and there's a Saivite interpretation of it. And so gradually, things came to the issue between Tamil and Sanskrit in these debates. So what is superior, Tamil or Sanskrit? And this came to be a major issue. Nayagar himself was not didn't take an extreme position as Maraimalai Adigal came to take, contesting Nayagar, for example, the Vedas. Nayagar didn't directly dismiss the Vedas, written in Sanskrit. Maraimalai Adigal referred to, when Avvaiyar refers to Avvaiyar, the poet, sage, Tamil poet sage, Avvaiyar, when she refers to Nal Vedangal, Maraimalai Adigal is asserting that she's referring to Tamil Vedas, not the Aryan Vedas, not the Sanskrit Vedas. He contends there were Tamil Vedas that were lost in the tsunamis that took place in the ancient period. So he calls them Tamil Marais for Vedam, who's Tamil Marai. So language contestation. So basically, when Nayagar passes away in 1901, Maraimalai Adigal takes on the mantle of Somasundara Nayagar as the biggest revivalist of Saivam in Tamil Nadu. And, at that time, the Aruppa-Maruppa Por, you may have heard of, between the second Aruppa-Maruppa Por, right? The first one was between Ramalinga Swami and Arumuga Navalar of Yalpana. The second Arpa Por took place in 1901 under the leadership of Maraimalai Adigal for the Arpas, defending Ramalinga Swamigal, and Kadaravait Pillai, a disciple of Arumonavalar, against Ramalinga Swamigal's work being considered Arpa. So even there, you know, this the contest between Sanskrit and Tamil is evident. And by 1901, by 1903, when Maraimalai Adigal takes over the leadership of the Saiva Siddhanta organization founded by Somasundara Nayagar and makes it the main, you know, branch, main center of Saiva Siddhanta revivalist activities all over Tamil Nadu, and starts a journal called Gnanasagaram, and in which you already get writings about, you know, basically advocating pure Tamil, writing in pure Tamil, getting rid of Sanskrit. So to come back to your question about Tani Tamil Iyakam, starting in 1916 as the, you can see it's beginning even earlier in the 1900s, because Maraimalai Adigal is publishing in this Saivite journal, basically supposed to be Gnanasagaram, the mouthpiece of the Saiva Siddhanta organization founded by Somasundara Nayagar, basically citing Robert Caldwell and saying Tamil is far older, richer, greater than Sanskrit. And so he starts the fight as early as that. And another thing you need to know, I guess, when Maraimalai Adigal's position at the Madras Christian College as a Tamil Pandit was enabled very much by Somasundara Nayagar and Thiruvadurai Adinam, I think, as you may have noted in my book. He was asked by Somasundara Nayagar to go to Thiruvadurai Adinam and get the blessings of the Adina Talaivar at the time. And it's only after the blessings that, because I think Reverend Miller, who was the principal of Madras Christian College at the time, I think, I don't know, somehow connected, and he was able to get the position. And when he got the position, Surya Narayana Sastri, who was I hear, a Brahmin, Paridhimar Kalanger, he had already changed his name from Surya Narayana Sastri to a Tamil, right? To Paridhimar Kalanger. So there were people anterior to Adigal in this. But sure enough, I mean, this movement, if you look at his diaries, that he doesn't write anything about founding the Tani Tamil Iyakam in 1916. He makes his earliest reference to Tani Tamil, or wanting to write in Tani Tamil in around 1920s, when he's translating a Ceylon memorial sent to him by his Ceylon friend from Sri Lanka, who wanted a parliamentary thing translated in Tamil, and he notes that he wanted to write it in pure Tamil. And that was the first reference he makes to wanting to write in pure Tamil. But even the journal Gnanasagaram that he founded in 1903, it's Sanskrit name, right? Gnanasagaram. He changes it to Arivukadal much later in the 1920s. So yes, officially it starts in 1960s and then goes on and had profound impact. And, you know, there were his successors who took it even further, and it, you know, accomplished a great deal in terms of bringing a lot of the old Tamil words that were out of circulation back in circulation, and certainly enriched Tamil a great deal. So I'm not trying to say that it wasn't a movement that did not achieve. It did achieve a great deal. But in terms of the actual evidence for this kind of founding moment, there isn't much reference in his writings or in his diaries as doing that. But my main argument is that it is part of the fight, the Neo-Saivite fight against Vedanta. And that's where you can really, truly locate the genealogy, if you like, of the Tanitamil Iyakkam, the Dravidian ideology, all this from a contest between two supports religious ideologies, right? One is called derisively as Mayavada, which is the bane of the Indian civilization, according to the missionaries. You know, everything is Maya, all this, that is why India is in such a sad state, wrote many of the British colonial officials and missionaries, and even many German philosophers. I mean, Hegel talked about India as a civilization of dreams, thanks to this Brahmin philosophy of Mayavada, and have cast the whole population in this spell of and countering that, you have this Neo-Saivite saying, oh no, we are not into that. The Tamil tradition is much more rational. The Tamil Saivite tradition is much more rational. For example, Padi, Pasu, Pasam, these are eternal qualities that they don't dissolve in the ultimate oneness that Mayavada is talking about, and that we give the world and the self reality. And therefore, our philosophy is much more in tune with European notion of God, of a transcendent God, whereas the Advaitic concept of God, there is no God, as Somasundar Nayakar criticized the Brahmo Samajas, saying, they're basically atheists. The Advaitants are basically atheists or even Christians. They're not even Hindus, according to Somasundar Nayakar, because he was critical. And he was arguing for idol worship, right? Because Brahma Samaj was at that time saying, really no need even for idol worship or temple worship or any ritual worship. So Nayakar was establishing, in a way, a room for the South Indian temple-oriented Hinduism, Saiva Siddhanta. And that Adigal takes further and basically changes Saiva Siddhanta into almost like a Periyarist ideology, advocating love marriage, just secularizing it. Social reform, advocating intercaste marriage, and claiming this is all part of Saivism or Saiva Siddhanta, as opposed to the Brahminical Vedanta, right? Makes these binaries, these polarities.
Yeah, thanks a lot for such a detailed answer, sir. I mean, your answer raised a lot of questions also. One of the follow-up questions would be, you mentioned quite a lot about we'll come back to Dravidian movement and Shaivite movement later. That forms the better part of the second half of our interaction. So you mentioned the difference about Sri Lankan Shaivites, from the hands of Arumuga Navalar towards Kadri Velpillai on the one hand, and then you place Tamil Shaivites like from Vallalar to Somasundara Nayagar and then to Maraimalai Adigal. You could neatly place these two, and then you also place them in Aruppa Marpa debate and the second phase of Aruppa Marpa debate. Why is there such a difference between Sri Lankan Shaivites and the Tamil Shaivites? And we find throughout history that Tamil Shaivites uphold anti or non-Brahminism or anti-caste reforms, as you rightly said. Right now, they are. I mean, it comes close to Periyar's ideology, and that's your argument also in the work. It comes closer there. But the Sri Lankan Shaivism, surprisingly does not. Why is there such a difference? And then
Yeah, again, a very interesting and very important question. And I think, if you look at Aruma Navalar's pioneering revivalist efforts of Tamil and Saivism, it takes place in the 1840s, much before Caldwell, much before much of this Orientalist writing about Dravidianism and Dravidian independence from Sanskrit and all that. That may be one reason that you don't see much evidence of this Orientalist impact on Navalar. You certainly see Christian impact because, as you probably are aware, that Navalar was working for a missionary, Reverend Peter Percival, helping him translate Bible, apparently, and then he turns against and starts becoming the champion of Saivam and Tamil. So that's one reason, the earlier nature of the revival. The second, perhaps, is the caste configuration in Tamil Nadu and the relative powers of different groups in Tamil Nadu vis-a-vis Sri Lanka, right? And also the rise of Sinhala Buddhist nationalism takes place much later. Navalar didn't sense any hostility from the Sinhala Buddhists, as far as I can tell. He was sort of in a sea of safety, so to speak. And the Brahmin population of Sri Lanka is even less. And they were never a landed power in Sri Lanka. Right? They were basically temple priests and didn't have much power. Like the Vallalas had, and we have a curious case that the Tamil Vallalas are almost 50% of the population in Sri Lanka among the Tamils, right? How could that be when in the mainland, I think it's 15%. So, that you've heard this Mella Mella, the different castes became Vallalas, both here and there. So perhaps these are the reasons that, and in a way, it is consistent with the earlier Saivite balance between Brahmins and so-called non-Brahmins, because they were, as they argued, they were part of one body of society, and there was no major animosity, right? As many of the defenders of Navala's side make clear in the battle against the Tamil Nadu Neo-Saivites. So these may be factors, right? And I think, certainly Christianity had a lot of influence on the kind of Saivism and Tamil that Navalar constructed or revived. He was like the great champion of the early pioneer of prose writing in Tamil, right? Both for India and Sri Lanka. He was like, but he brought a lot of the Christian values and, let's even say the Puritanism, banning temple dances from temples and, all these strict advocacy of caste norms even that Navalar advocated, right? So it was a kind of and it's not surprising that Tiruvadurai Madam is the one that gave him the title Navala, right? So Tiruvadurai in the Madangal, I mean, the Neo-Saivites were equally critical of the traditional Madangal, the Vallala-led. You know, on the one hand, they were patrons of Tamil, but they also were not as critical of Brahmins or Sanskrit as the Neo-Saivites wanted to be. So, yeah, I don't know whether that answers your question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very well. Very well. Adding on to this, what is Maraimalai Adigal's perception of the monasteries or mutts, and what was his relationship with mutts? We see that in the modern era or in the colonial era, mutts had to go through. Mutts did not go to that much transition as Maraimalai Adigal or many people have thought about, and he had a bit of complicated relation with mutts. When he established, new. Saiva Siddhanta movement. Many people from mutts did not join. You mentioned quite a lot of that in your work, and then there were some oppositions also, and then some compromises also. If you could paint a picture of it, it would be nice. Yeah.
Well, I haven't, to tell you the truth, I haven't gone into it a lot, but I think, from what I gathered from my work was that it was a kind of ambivalent relationship. On the one hand, even the fact that he got this job at Madras Christian College with the blessings of Tiruvadurai Madam in 1898 shows that he knew the power of it. Even the Madras Christian College library, many books were donated from Tiruvadurai Madam. There was a Dravidian language association. Maraimalai Adigal, as soon as he came to MCC, established many of these Tamil Dravida associations, which were very active in promoting that kind of Tamil Dravidian ideology. Many of his students also went on to become advocates of this. So MCC was a really, even the journal, Madras Christian College Magazine, which is a very, very high quality journal at the time, was advocating or giving space for, people like Sundaram Pillai's writings, Purnalingam Pillai, many of these writers who were glorifying Dravidian Tamil civilization. But yeah, your question about, these are the newly created public, right? Maraimalai Adigal, Sundaram Pillai are not from the traditional mutts. They were not Pandits affiliated to Tiruvadurai or like Uvesa, or many of the earlier Pandits who are attached to the Madangal, Saiva Madangal. These were, the newly created urban spaces. They were the people operating these newly created public, and they were writing for that public. So there was an ambivalent relationship, if you like. Many of the functions that Maraimalai Adigal organized, he would send messages to the Madam, get shawls and other insignias of blessings from them, but at the same time in his writing be critical of all the wealth hoarded in these madams and are of not much use to the people, and that all that money should be taken by the government and should be spent on welfare of the Tamils and establishment of schools and universities. These were the kind of things that they were advocating. They were not advocating for the kind of religiosity that or the traditional rituals that the Madangals were advocating and were in charge of, training of temple priests, carrying on, overseeing so much of their lands, etc. Right. So I think there was an ambivalent. There was not open hostility, but it was a balancing act, and you can see that even now, right? In the Thiruvaruthura, sending that Sengol to Parliament, the new Parliament building, and even during the time. Adigal's time, Adigal used to compose poems in praise of King George and on behalf of the Madams, because we would get messages from Nallasamy Pillai to help compose a poem in Tamil to the British royalty on behalf of the Madams. The Madams always maintained good relations with the rulers. Right?
Yeah.
Thanks. It was a balancing act. I would say it's a balancing act.
Sure, it's balancing act. We could see, as you said, even now also. So now, let us go on to your main argument and the elephant in the room. You spoke about, you place Adigal as, to an extent, an antecedent and an inspiration to the non-Brahmin movement. Not an inspiration per se, but an antecedent to the non-Brahmin movement, which, arose in the, second decade of the 20th century. You even demonstrate that an atheist or a secularist movement, like the Dravidian movement or self-respect movement in this regard, is inspired by religious movements of the past, and especially in this case, Tamil-Saivite movement. You underscore its importance also. Since you answer many questions at once, I'll ask many questions at once itself. So, what are Adigal's views on caste? How did he oppose Brahmin hegemony? You've already answered that quite a bit. But what was his relationship with self-respect movement and Periyar? You mentioned about the general view is that there was a brief period of cooperation between these two figures, and then when self-respect movement started attacking Shaivism, there was Adigal was so furious over it. You mentioned that in your separate chapters dedicated to Adigal's fury towards self-respect movement. How he was attacking self-respect as ideology and atheism in this particular thing. And then there were issue-based solidarity for anti-Hindi movement and anti-Hindi agitations. Could you just paint a picture of his relationship with self-respect movement, his relationship with Periyar, and his understanding of caste in that regard?
For that, and I think where you're coming from, if I'm assuming correctly, the scholarship on the Dravidian movement and Tamil nationalism or pure Tamil movement has in fact been very much influenced by the long shadow of the Dravidian movement itself and the Dravidian politics that's been going on. So basically, that scholarship has been very much influenced by the Dravidian movement itself, so that it foregrounds the secular, atheistic, progressive aspects of the movement as much as possible and tries to distance itself from those earlier so-called cultural antecedents or even Tamil nationalist antecedents. So coming back to this, so if I may answer it in that longer perspective. So part of my struggle in writing this book and in working on Maraimalai Adigal and illuminating this Neo-Saivite connection is to overcome that, parceling out of the Dravidian movement into this early phase where it's supposed to be elitist and conservative Saivites or even Ayadidas's Neo-Buddhism is seen as the early phase and really not much continuity between that and the progressive phase with the entry of Periyar and secularism and rationality and self-respect, and then the post-Periyarist developments are now Kalaignar, and all this, so on and so forth. I, for one, do not want to, are not too comfortable with that uh, parceling out so firmly uh, the movement into these discrete phases, because I see a lot of continuity. Recently, I worked on another race, Aryamai, and basically almost word for word, it is coming. I mean, you can see the Neo-Saivite ideology of Tamil nationalism, anti-Brahminism, just word for word. It could have been written by Maraimalai Adigal. The citing with of Christian missionary writing on Hinduism as the gospel, as an impartial truth about Hinduism, and the role of Brahmins. You know, this is exactly what Maraimalai Adigal was doing. And you see that in Anna, who had spent years with Periyar as a kind of close disciple of Periyar, and yet he's using this very anti-Brahmin Tamil nationalist discourse that is a carryover from the Neo-Saivite phase of the movement. So so first of all, I wouldn't want to break it into discrete groups like that. I think it serves a particular political purpose. Secondly, I think the interaction or the relationship between Periyar and Maraimalai Adigal is much more complex than depicted in the scholarship, in this so-called progressive scholarship. That, as you probably see from my book, it was Tiruvika who was part of this sort of, who goaded Adigal to fight with Periyar, saying that Saivism under serious threat by the emergence of the self-respect movement. That and he had to convince. I mean, Maraimalai Adigal didn't even seem to be aware so much of the emergence and the power of the self-respect movement. So Tiruvika, who was a pan-Saivite, pan-Hindu Saivite, who didn't have that Dravidianist ideology, who was a member of the Congress Party, as you know, is the one who said, who alerted Adigal to be careful and try to contest, goaded him to contest the work of the self-respecters, and so he did. I guess like a fool, and then he got burnt. And then even the peacemaking is done by Tiruvika. But even the Periyarists admit that much of Adigal's writings or his work is they like, and they themselves feel beholden to Adigal's Neo-Saivism, because much of it is, you hate the Brahmins, we hate the Brahmins. You hate Sanskrit, we hate Sanskrit. You are against caste, we are also against caste. So what's the problem? Okay, the problem is that you still believe in the Nalvar or the Saivite saints. But even then, you know, Adigal would, organize all these conferences on changing the rituals used by the Tamils, you know, to do marriage rituals or puberty ceremonies or whatever ceremonies without the aid of Brahmins, so that a non-Brahmin way of doing things can be formed. I mean, this is much, you know, the kind of reforms that Periyar also was asking, right? Without these Brahminical rituals. So there was a lot of similarity, and particularly in the case of when he wrote this essay, famous essay called Tamil Nattavaram Melnattavaram, basically the Tamils and the Westerners, comparing the Tamilians to the Western, the English, where he praised, Adigal praised the English institutions, you know, their schools for everyone, their hospitals for everyone, universities, the British spending so much on education, whereas in ancient India, you know, much of the population was not even allowed to study or go to school. This kind of basically argument that Adigal was putting forth in this tract on Tamil Nattavaram and Melnattavaram, where he's praising the British for making these changes. And even there he's attacking the madams and temples, hoarding, you know, acres and acres of land and so much jewels, which is going waste, whereas the British are spending, you know, millions on education, transportation, all kinds of progress. So this essay that he wrote in 1930s came under attack by the Indian the Indian nationalists. And when it came, and it was going to be part of the curricula of Madras University BA program. And there was huge protest from the certain nationalist or Brahminical quarters, and Adigal was extremely worried about these protests. And of course, Periyar and the self-respecters came to the rescue, organized counter protests, and basically, you know, saved the day from Maraimalai Adigal, who was kind of terrified about these things. So there was collaboration. Adigal was getting Periyar's publications, his journals. He was contributing articles on the Ramayana for Revolt, the Self-Respect magazine. So there was, unlike what is depicted, quite a lot of collaboration, and personally they were friends. They visited each other. Aside from that period of extreme conflict. So yeah, but I think the larger argument I think I am trying to make is that it is this secularization of Neo-Saivism that laid the groundwork for this kind of social reform, anti-Brahmin, anti-caste, all these things. That of course Periyar had his own atheistic philosophy, but I think the platform, the foundation was made possible by these earlier changes wrought by, you know, people like Adigal and the Neo-Saivite movement. And of course, you know, the role played by Ten India, Tamil Nadu, what is it called? Saivasiddhanta Kala Publishing Limited. That also was massive because basically by the 1920s, they collected a whole bunch of Tamil Pandits, emerging Tamil Pandits, collecting their writing, started publishing Sem Tamil Selvi, kind of in parallel to Madurai Tamil Sangam's journal Sem Tamil. So Sem Tamil Selvi was propagating this Neo-Saivite Tamil nationalist ideology. And basically, I would argue that this laid the groundwork for the kind of Tamil Renaissance and Dravidianism that enabled the Dravidian parties to come to power, right? Using much of this same, but in a different, more modulated language.
Yeah, that was an excellent argument like that you have made, and then it's substantiated with enough sources and evidences actually. It's like, yeah, a very compelling argument of yours, but it kind of like reminds me of Aloysius' work, Religion as Emancipatory Identity, about Ayotitas. In fact, towards the conclusion, he even makes a similar argument actually, that like the groundwork that is done by Sakya Bauddha Sangam of Ayotitas, in fact, like had similar ideas about like what I mean, not as it told, like it's also a religious movement, a Dalit religious Buddhist movement actually. So it
Mm-hmm.
had certain ideas, it propagated certain ideas, certain values. So, like later on, like some of the Buddhists, like after Ayodhya's death, some the Buddhist association of him, they works closely with Periyar actually. Whenever Periyar visits Kolar, Tangavai, like KGF in Karnataka, like he
Mm-hmm.
goes and then like back the Madras presidency KGF, so he go and meet with the Buddhist society there actually. Even in Tamil Nadu, in self-respect movement conferences, we see Buddhists sitting. Periyar celebrating the birth of Buddha, the birthday of Buddha, as well as like Buddha Purnima. He openly organizes programs on celebrating Buddha. So Aloysius makes similar argument. I just like
Mm-hmm.
want to know what is your view on that actually. So can we place Ayotitas in the similar framework that you're telling? It's also a religious movement, but it is not as massive as Neo-Saivite movement. It's not so massive.
Yes,
Uh,
I think that's the basic difference. I think I agree with you, and I know Aloysius personally, and I'm familiar with his work, and I think it's a very important work. And but I think he was, and they were the neo-Buddhists were doing similar things, right? They were taking old Tamil literature and doing a Buddhist commentary on it, because it's founded on language and literature. This whole revival is reclaiming the past through a different lens, through a neo-Buddhist lens. I think, and it may have helped people like Maraimalai Adigal and many of the other Neo-Saivites, and inspired them to do their Neo-Saivite rendition of this. And Ayodhyadas was a pioneer in that way. But I think the extent, the it was much more limited in its reach. This had, I mean, Madras Christian College, the Saiva Siddhanta Kalaham, having branches all over Tamil Nadu and in Sri Lanka. The kind of, at one point, someone noted that Saiva Siddhanta Kalaham has published more books in Tamil than all the big universities in Tamil Nadu till 1977. So Kalaham has undertaken, and of course, they organized, they helped, took part in the anti-Hindi agitation. They sent delegates to the ruling parties at the time to initiate building of these statues of many of these Dravidianist figures like G.U. Pope, and there were some other figures also on Marina Beach and all this. So they had much more clout, and much more wider reach, I would say, right? And the caste configuration, caste power is also, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a purely Ballala affair, but I think, they had more power. But if you look at Maraimalai Adigal's mailing list for his journal, Many came from not just Tamil Nadu, from Ceylon at the time, the Malayan Strait settlements, Burma, and many of them were middle castes, Chettis, Valalas, uh, and others, but predominantly the middling caste, I would say. And I mean, of course, I mean, do you have similar backing for Ayurvedasa like the Saivasiddhanta Madangal? I mean, there was no. I mean, Ayurvedasa had to bring Buddhist monks from Sri Lanka to officiate or to, you know, to be ordained even as a Buddhist, right? Whereas here, you already had the existence of networks of support. Panditurai Devar, they were also big donors. Many of the landed zamindars were backing this project. I would call Maraimalai Adigal a print capitalist. I don't know whether you've read the book, Benedict Anderson's book on nationalism. Basically, he argues that nationalism is basically created by what he calls print capitalists. Adigal managed to build this almost a malige, his palace of a house, from all these people who were prepared to, send him so much money for his writings and publications, and donations for his, he called it an ashram later, but, it was a big network of supporters.
Thanks a lot, sir. That clear things. And I had one question from the previous answer, that you are speaking about. So, in your work, also you make an argument of secularization of a religious philosophy. For instance, Tamil Saivism, it is secularized, and then it formed the essence of certain Dravidian arguments, and even the movement and its philosophy. And you make quite another startling argument right now also, and you said that Maraimalai Adigal to an extent secularized Tamil Shaivism as such. So when we come to Dravidian movement, it's double levels of secularization. From an older form, Tamil Shaivism become universalized at the hands of the likes of Maraimalai Adigal, and it's still more universalized beyond religion at the hands of self-respect movement and Periyar, and all of that. There is double level of secularization. It's quite a startling argument, and your whole work deals with this conundrum of the relationship between religion and secularism. How do you get the framework of your work? The relationship between what is religion, what is secular. I mean, where do you get the framework? How do you come to this?
Yeah, no, this is again a very, very important question, and I think theoretically, let me say, I mean, my own writing, and my own work on Maraimalai Adigal, I had to struggle for a theoretical understanding how I could put it all together to make sense of, how this Saiva Siddhanta revivalist actually was doing politics, or what seemed like politics, when he should be, meditating or being spiritual. He was making nationalist statements and talking about the hoary age of the Tamils and how great they were, and Brahmins and Aryans as basically barbarians who were civilized by the Tamils. But they turned it the other way and all that. I just couldn't make sense. Why would a religious person? So, and here I think, and I was very much influenced by what you call post-Orientalist theoretical frames, after Said, and then Indian post-colonial writings and subaltern studies, and a lot of interesting work has also been done on Sri Lankan Sinhala Buddhist nationalism, unraveling that. David Scott, important scholar in that regard, who worked on early Christian missionary writing on Buddhism in Sri Lanka, and how they had a hard time grappling with the so-called Buddhists who also carried out exorcism, devil chasing, chasing devils from people who were possessed by demons. He couldn't reconcile that with the kind of Protestant view of Buddhism that Orientalist writing had promoted. So David Scott's work was also very useful, and then of course Talal Azad writing on genealogies of religion, and since then, and for me most importantly, the writings of Arvind Mandel, who had worked on the construction of a Khalsa Sikh identity in the late 19th, early 20th century, much like the case of the Tamil identity construction here. And of course, you heard of Bala Gangadhara, Professor Bala Gangadhara's writings on, as part of this post-secular theoretical scholarship coming. So I think what I find, see, earlier, many of these phenomena of this kind of Sinhala Buddhist nationalism, or it's sort of more authoritarian, almost neo-fascist tendencies, were described by anthropologists as Protestant Buddhism. Anthropologists would use they would use Protestant Hinduism. This is how colonial transformation,
especially Ganna Tobayasekare has
Obesekara's work, and many others, and David Scott is one in a more recent. See, the way, for example, David Scott writes about this is that he looks at colonialism in two phases. The early, up to the 19th century, there's an early phase that was not interested in constructing subjects, colonial subjects. They were just interested in ruling and plundering the economy or whatever that imperialism, colonialism does. But by the mid-19th century, he calls this phase, starting in the mid-19th century, Second Empire colonialism, where subjectivities are also constructed as part of the colonial project, indigenous subjectivities. So, in a way, people making or religion making itself. So when Fanon, if you're familiar with Fanon's work, considered like the Bible of anti-colonial struggles, Fanon says basically the colonized should unite to fight, to physically fight and throw out the colonizers. And it is in that struggle, that united struggle, a new culture or a new man is formed that comprises a culture that just comes out of the struggle. It is not the ancient culture, ancient Hinduism or Buddhism, but it's a culture that comes out of the various social groups coalescing and fighting, and that should be the culture of the new man, right? Well, what David Scott and others are saying is that is not possible, because the second phase of colonialism is actually actively following Foucault constructing subjects as, oh, you're a Muslim, you're a Gujarati, you're a Tamil, you're a Sikh, you're, and how can they unite? Because they're already consolidated into separate contending identities. So Orientalist knowledge forms has also helped produce individual subjectivities. So Fanon's project of, which he advocated in Algeria, of uniting against the French and expelling the French would not be possible, because then it just gets veered off into various tribal nationalisms, right? Or Islamic movements. So Arvind's work is especially interesting in this regard, because, and even basically, we cannot take religion as you need religion for the emergence of the secular, right? Or putting it in this post-secular perspective is that there was no religion. I mean, the term religion, it should only actually be applied to Christianity, or at best the Judaic or the
Judeo-Christian framework.
Judeo-Christian tradition.
One true religion as such.
Yeah. And basically, it was a tool of colonialism to give the term religion for all these disparate traditions in Asia or Africa or the Middle East. Maybe not the Middle East, because there's Judaic traditions there too. But by doing so, by giving a kind of an equal status to religions in Asia, but what they're actually doing is that they are put it another way, Christianity and the missions, one element is just actively proselytizing, propagating Christianity. The second element, the second way of doing that is to construct religions in all these different societies, right? And of course, the natives are not just passive. They also say, okay, we are Sikhs, or we are Saivasiddhantas, or we are Advaitans. They actively participate in constructing their religion, supposedly in opposition to Christianity, but in the language and spirit of this Christian tradition. So they basically become co-equals, partners in this game of the spread of religion. And in so doing, Arvind Manders are arguing, are creating the same issues, the same racism, the same binaries between us and the other. And what he calls the spread of monotheolingualism. So these traditions become monotheistic in the fashion of Christianity, because if they want to be admitted into the club of religion, they also, the rational religions, like the Western religions, they have to have along with English, another mother tongue, a monolingual tongue. So in South India, in the 17th and 18th century, it was much more multilingual. But by the 19th century, everyone had to have a mother tongue in the fashion of, European colonizers advocating the mother tongue. So this monotheolingualism is established as, a different arm of the colonial enterprise. So these are different versions of Christianity. So Buddhism is really a different version of Christianity, or Saivism is a different version, but an inferior version. And it's quite complicated to explain this, but this is a form of secularization. Because here, it's not, and Talal Azad's work points to this, right? If in the medieval period, religion meant much more ritualistic, disciplining the body and mind through various physical practices, right? But by the early modern period, after the Reformation, right, religion becomes basically a kind of a cerebral thing. It's a mind-oriented thing that you should be able to explain religion in terms of a philosophy. Everyone has to have a book that carries its central tenets, just in the fashion of the Judeo-Christian tradition, right? Like you have the Bible, we have the Gita, you have the Bible, we have the Meikandar Sivajnana Bodham, and then we have to have a notion of a transcendent God, as opposed to much in the Asian traditions, which didn't really even have a God, like be it in Buddhism. But then Buddha became a God. So these kind of changes, that it's a sort of a reconfiguring religion. And in this reconfiguration, nationalism is part of it. Because this religion has to have a history in order to be considered religion. So Saivism has to certainly have a history. So all these army of school teachers, like this theorist on nationalism said, had to construct one. If it didn't have a history, we have to construct one. We have to see some of the earliest English-educated Tamil writers talked about the poets, wrote about the poets of Tamil, the Tamil lands, talked about the Bhakti saints, their histories. So we have to compile all this. So history and a kind of nations need history. So this basically lays the groundwork for nationalism, right? And a move away from sort of disciplinary bodily practices that characterize the earlier sort of spiritual tradition, right? Now you can give a lecture on Saiva Siddhanta or Vedanta or Buddhism and pass off as a great saint. Whereas in the olden days, it was also accompanied by, various disciplinary practices and, and these are the kind of changes that I think took place for this to happen. And Arvind Mandar looks at the case of the making of the Khalsa Sikh identity, how it got foregrounded from a multiplicity of traditions that may have influenced, the rise of Guru Nanak, from the Kabir Panths, from the Nath yogic traditions, from various Sufi traditions that gave rise to Sikhism or the Sikh gurus. But what became emphasized was this Khalsa Sikh identity. And for his work, I mean, he's got various death threats from certain sections of the Sikh community for writing this book, ostensibly in support of the Sikhs, but it's taken wrongly, right? So he's basically saying that if you engage with colonialism at that level, you continue that sort of Enlightenment, post-Enlightenment liberal rational tradition that also creates binaries and racial hierarchies. And whereas maybe the situation in Asia was not like that. This monotheolingualism didn't exist. There was a multiplicity of tradition, and there was no need to define one tradition uh, as, and mark its boundaries so clearly as what the colonial impact has done. So, yeah, I don't know whether I've been clear in this answer, but this is the post-secular argument, because there is, religion hasn't gone away. It has just taken a secular frame, or the appearance of a secularism, but basically a lot of that um, same thing is articulated in a new form. And religion has been the tool of the West, because we didn't have a religious tradition. We had multiple traditions, which perhaps don't coincide with, which cannot be described adequately through this term religion, because that's largely a kind of concept derived from the Judeo-Christian tradition, and that may not be applicable for much of the traditions in Asia or Latin America.
Yeah, thanks a lot, sir. Actually, so I think this argument is like very fresh in Tamil. So they haven't like, I mean, like Arvind Mandal has proposed, like did his case study on Sikhism in modern Punjab, but like
Mm-hmm.
his argument or Edward's like Talal Azad's this thing, making of religion, Talal Azad's work, these things and all aren't applied to study Tamil region actually. What has happened to the religion? No, these frameworks weren't
Mm-hmm.
used to study Tamil region till now. Until
Mm-hmm.
your work is the first thing that has started it actually. But
Right.
that is why I want this work it should be translated into Tamil, so that like we haven't had this perspective actually. We thought religion disappeared in Tamil country. For us, for most of us, with the advent of the Dravidian movement, with the advent of self-respect movement, religion disappeared actually. But your argument using these frameworks, it gives us a very fresh perspective actually, very fresh perspective on looking into what happened, and these things will help us to understand the political present also. Without
Mm-hmm.
these things, like what is happening in Tamil Nadu, why the parties that advocated rationalism, atheism, why it took a very different turn to understand these things and all. Like I think it is necessary to look from these lenses actually, the lenses that you have given to us. I think that is why I think it should be, the work has to be translated in Tamil also. Into Tamil also, the work has to be translated. So that is.
Yeah, no, I would like, I've been meaning to, but I've struggled with it. But actually, giving this interview has inspired me to try and do that project that's been there for a long time. It's difficult to translate. I mean, even in English, I think many of these ideas this post-secular idea is so difficult to explain and difficult to comprehend, that you need a lot of European philosophy just to kind of deconstruct this, uh, because it just sounds very mumbo jumbo. When you first hear of it, this post secularism, and it's a kind of a fancy theoretical thing that really doesn't really apply to us, because we are realists, we are really grounded, firmly grounded, and this is sort of an artsy fartsy theory. Uh, but it's really, I mean, I find it really important, because I think we are, as Arvind Mandel says, I think we are trapped in these, uh, by constructing these very rigid identities, right? Be it Dravidian as opposed to the Aryan, and we participate in the same traps that the colonial project and the Western Enlightenment tradition has led to. I mean, the Western modernity has resulted in. I mean, one of its results is the the Holocaust, Nazi Germany. Hegel talked about Germany being, the most advanced in terms of the Geist, the spirit, um, and Protestant Christianity and he ranked world religions uh, into a hierarchy in which Germany and Protestant Christianity has um, represent the highest development of man at that time, right? This process of rationalization, the dialectic of reason, and when we call our tradition religion and construct a religion like Saiva Siddhanta, or we are also participating in that rationality, in that, and we become victims to the same issues that they have encountered, which is leading to racism, to objectivizing the other. So these are prone. I mean, I'm looking at the case of uh, Tamil Dravidian nationalism. This happens in Sinhala Buddhist and in the Neo-Vedantic and Indian Hindu nationalism. It's all absorbing this kind of Western interpretation of religion and going with it and othering, and in the process losing the spiritual essence behind those traditions, right? And it becomes basically a vehicle for political empowerment of a particular community, right? At the expense of the other. And I think, Arvind Mande in his most recent work is talking about Guru Nanak's philosophy of ego-less thought, right? Very much like what you find in Saiva Siddhanta and Vedanta, and it comes from the Upanishad, without binaries between us and the other, right? But whereas, it takes a lot of deconstruction to at least even explain where Guru Nanak is coming from when he's talking about ego-less thought without ego. Um, whereas many of these traditions have been constructed in the late 19th century with ego, with binaries, us and them. So I also see this as because I think the essence of Saiva Siddhanta is lost in this process, right? The essential teachings of, going without mind, renouncing the world, all those things that were part of that philosophy in Buddhism. I mean, look at Sinhala Buddhist nationalism. It's also very vitriolic when it comes to the other, saying that, only Sinhalese, it's inseparable from the construction of Sinhala ethnicity. Right?
Even Gananath speaks about the loss of conscience in this process of modern Buddhism, so on and so forth, and how modern religion essentially takes away the, certain essences of conscience, as you said, kindness and other stuff. I'm sorry, I'm
Compassion.
just commenting it. Yeah, Arun, sorry.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I think this is the process that's happening, and I think there's a larger cause behind trying to unravel this, because I think this kind of ethnicization of religion. I mean, in the case here, and or racialization of religion, if you want, how you know how far it has moved away from that sort of the original teachings of the prophet or the saint or whoever came up with those traditions, right? It's Yeah, I mean, if you look at what's happening in Sri Lanka with the discovery of Buddhist monuments in the north and east, and yes, there are Buddhist monuments in the north and east, but they could be Tamil Buddhist monuments, the Mahayana Buddhism that was prevalent in South India and northern Sri Lanka. But those government-driven archaeology, is not even open to that, and the Tamils themselves are not open to that, and they feel, oh, okay, if we discover a Tamil Buddhist, we should quickly destroy it because they would come and claim it to be a Sinhala area. So the ethnicization of religion, right? And even the neo-Buddhists in Tamil Nadu, I mean, they've in their own way have kind of ethnicized or Buddhism as well, right? From a kind of universal thing for mobilization or empowerment of groups. I mean, albeit rightly so.
Yeah. So thank you, sir. The next question, we just a couple of questions, and then we will end before ending the interview. So now we can move about criticisms on Maraimalai Adigal and his movement. So among from the academia, MSS Pandian has pointed out, launched a criticism again on Maraimalai Adigal in his Brahmin and non-Brahmin, that famous book. He has pointed out that he kind of puts Maraimalai Adigal and Ayodhyadas together, and then he
Yeah.
makes a criticism on both of them actually. So he
Yeah.
tells that both of them kind of constructs a golden past. In Maraimalai Adigal, in his Vellalar Naharigam, he kind of construct a golden past in which the Vellalar is a dominant figure, and not just dominant but a Brahmin-like figure. So while Maraimalai Adigal is and part of non-Brahmin, anti-Brahmin movement, he is kind of replacing the Brahmin with Velalar. So Pandian argues that in a way, though they are anti-Brahmin, in a way they are still kind of uses kind of looks up to the Brahmins, and then want to displace Brahmin, replace Brahmin.
Brahmanizing Vellalars, yeah.
Yeah. So that kind of argument, similarly, he points us make the same criticism against Ayodhyadas also. The Ayodhyadas wants the Periyar Buddhist identity to be replaced, to replace the Brahmin identity actually. So how do you look into this criticism of MSS Pandian, who argues that Maraimalai Adigal is basically an elitist, although his rhetoric of anti-Brahmins is again Brahminical values. Still, somehow it still want to situate himself within that identity. So, how do you look into this criticism?
Yeah, I've read Pandian, and I know Pandian personally as well, and he's a tremendous scholar. No, I think I think what he's trying to do and he Professor Sivathambi I think first started this practice of looking at the Dravidian movement in separate phases, the early elitist phase, then Periyar, and so on. And Pandian then kind of rehashed that and brought it back again. And here he's using Ayodhyadas and Maraimalai Adigal as part of the early elitist phase. And he's also adding another dimension. He's also saying these people operated in binaries, which is binaries is a bad thing, operating in binaries. After post-colonial theory, because, they believed, this is coming from Fanon's early work on binaries, right? You cannot have black without white, right? So basically, the black man exists because of the white man, right? because the black man has to look at the white man and meet his gaze to be recognized as a black man, right? And so, you know, and I guess vice versa, because, you know, you wouldn't call them white, you would call them maybe pink or something. The notion of binaries and is very much you know, rooted in the colonial culture. When the colonizers looked at Africans as savages, right? You know, and themselves as civilized and highly developed. It's operating in binaries again, right? And what the early African nationalists were saying is that, and this is in Fanon's work, where he says the black nationalists was talking about their own golden age, you know. Africa before colonialism was, you know, so wonderful and great, and we were highly civilized. So basically, they're responding to the colonial oppression by saying, or the colonial charge that of them being uncivilized, and speaking in binaries by saying, no, we had a golden age, even perhaps better than your golden age, right? And I guess the Indian version is like, okay, when you guys were living in caves, we were inventing laser-guided missiles during Mahabharata. You know, while you were living in caves, right? We were, and so this is again participating in the colonial binaries, right? So binary thing is bad. And Maraimalai Adigal invoking the golden age of the Tamils or against the Aryans is still operating in terms of binaries. Whereas Periyar broke the binary and transcended the binary, right? Similarly, Adidasar also transposed Buddhism to Brahmanism, and he's also operating in binaries, right? But it took someone as great as Periyar to break this binary and talk about, you know, almost a kind of Fanonian liberation, saying Tamil is a Katumarandi Moli. And so he wasn't operating. But my question is that he still, you know, Maraimalai Adigal in his early struggle with at Madurai Tamil Sangam in 1905 wrote this famous essay called Pandai Kala Tamilarum Ariyarum, right? Where he said, when you guys supposedly came, the Aryans, we were so advanced, but through your cunning, you kind of degraded our great civilization and slowly grabbed power. So basically, this discourse is turning the table upside down, but it's still participating in binaries. But Periyar, I have it on, still, despite calling Tamil, apparently, allegedly calling Tamil a Katumarani Moli, that we have to, and it's 50 years behind English, and even at one point advocating people learn to speak in English, still considered that that Adigal's early work, Pandai Kala Tamilarum Ariyarum, as kind of a gospel. So basically, Periyar still had this binary about Aryan and Dravidian, participated in that. I mean, this is a result of that missionary binaries. So, but yet Pandian claims to, and maybe to some extent it's true for Periyar, but it's certainly not true for the DMK that came to power on this Tamil populism and basically bought wholesale these binary about the Tamil golden age. And basically the Neo-Saivite Tamil project is a project of recovery. It is not forward looking. It is Tamil was so wonderful, then ruined by all this. And all we have to do is to speak in pure Tamil and recover that Tamil golden age through pure Tamil. And it's still a project of recovery because we were already great. We just have to go back and recognize it. So isn't that another binary? A project of recovery. It's not like Fanon said, a moving forward project beyond binary that comes out of a struggle, actual physical struggle with the oppressor, right? So to come back to your question about Pandian's parceling these things, but I think I would not agree with him on that, because I think there's a lot of continuity, and that exercise of calling this a radical new phase where all kinds of castes were included in the project. I mean, was he successful politically? I mean, he basically stayed a reformer. It was the DMK that rode on his and on Tamil nationalism that came to power. So I have questions about that. I mean, I respect Pandian's work, but I think there to denote these people, Ayodhidasar and Maraimalai, to some kind of early phase, which was elitist and confined to a small public, whereas with the advent of Periyar, it was opened up for a whole broader public. You know, has elements of truth, but it's not the yeah.
Right, sir. Like, we understood the point you made. So the next, like one more criticism, and then like final question on sources. So another criticism, before, like there is a question on sources, but before that, one other criticism we often encounter about Maraimalai Adigal in specific, but in general about Tamil Neo-Saivite movement itself, is that it kind of like connected Tamil identity, Tamilness, Tamil Tanmai, Tamil Moli with Shaivism, with the religion, the Shaivite religion. So then automatically it excludes other religions actually. So it kind of like make otherness. So by glorifying the contribution of Shaivites to Tamil language, so it kind of like connects the Tamil language with the Shaivites, telling that okay, the entire Tamil uh, literature itself is prominently the contribution of Shaivites. So even a lot of myths originated. Like Tamil was born out of Shivan's Udukai, like from Shiva's musical instrument. One side Sanskrit came, with the other side the Tamil originated. So these kind of and the Sangam Tamil, about the Sangam story, the Sangam age, where Shiva is one of the judges actually. Shiva is part of the Sangam assembly of poets actually. Shiva is part of it. So by emphasizing or highlighting the Shaivites' contribution to the Tamil literature, Tamil rich literature, this Shaivite revivalist movement, and in which Maraimalai Adigal is part of it, uh, it kind of like they kind of excluded the contribution of other religions. So be it Islam, Buddhism, Jainism. So now in the common, in popular, in popular Tamil Nadu, like in the like we talk about like the Shaivites' contribution, and then the richness of Shaivites' role in developing Tamil literature. So in a way, it kind of like contributed to this popular memory. that other religion doesn't have a much role in shaping Tamil
Yeah.
literature actually. So this is a criticism
Yes.
we often encounter from Dalit circles also,
Mhm.
who now look into the Buddhist history, and then now they say the Neo-Saivite movement has contributed to this making of popular memory, where other religions are excluded from making making the Tamil literature or Tamil language and literature. Actually, how do you look into this criticism?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think that is part of as I pointed out, the danger of this kind of religion being used for this nationalist ethnic mobilization and othering. And as Arvind Mande says, it's a monotheolinguism, right? Monotheolinguism. The multiple influences that influenced the development of Tamil literature. I mean, from a Enlightenment perspective, the Buddhist and the Jaina period was the most enriching in terms of Tamil literary achievements, right? I mean, uh, dramatical works, poetry, fine arts, and yet it's sort of brushed under the carpet in this kind of Saivite rendering. But I mean, by the time we come to the secularization of this, I mean, even that is to some extent lost, right? The importance of all these contributions to Tamil of various traditions, right? So I agree with you, and I think this is a feature of this, the nature of the beast in this kind of religion making, that we are making religions in the model of Judeo-Christian religions by othering other traditions, by insisting on a mono-ethnic, monolingual origin, whereas there was a multiplicity of traditions that contributed to any language, be it Tamil or English or German. And it is only in this period where there's multiple that language does get enriched. But here it is a project fought exclusively to supposedly get rid of Sanskrit and the Aryan influence. And in that process, which may have certain justifications at that time, where Mani Pravalam was prevalent in the 18th century to try and get back the old Tamil words that have been lost. But in that very process, there's also other traditions not acknowledged.
Right, sir. Like, thanks for it. You want to ask something, Bharat?
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to ask about sources. Even in our last discussions, uh, I mean, Professor has been saying a lot about the sources, about the entire corpus of Maraimalai Adigal's diary and other publications. Could you talk a bit more about the sources for your research and how you went through it, how you found it, and I mean the whole process of research with your sources?
Well, I came for, after I came for my field work to Madras in the 93 to do my field work, and and Maraimalai Adigal Library that was located at that time in Paris Corner. I mean, that was a major source of information. His diaries were there. Many of his own writings were there. Many of the other notable writers, their writing, a lot of the journals of that era was available there. And there's various other places that I went to also. But I focused mostly on his writings, his journals, um, journals like Sen that came out of Madurai Sangam, Sen Selvi, newspapers, of the time, and accounts from contemporary figures, and so on and so forth. Yeah, and Maraimalai Adigal fortunately maintained a diary from 1898 to 1950 scrupulously. He didn't miss a day. And he kept this in English. He wrote it in English, and people say that he wrote it in English, although a great advocate of pure Tamil, because he didn't want others to, his family to read it, perhaps for secrecy reasons. I don't know what is the exact reason, but I think he was very comfortable in English. Right? He had, if you look at much of his writing, and you get very good information about the sources, the intellectual sources that went behind his writing. Writing about his commentaries on Tiruvasaram, for example, or his writings on commentaries on various ancient Tamil works, Vallala Nagarigam, அல்லது Tamilar Nagarigam, all these works that he was writing at the time, he relied a tremendous amount on English writings, right? The writings of on Christianity. I mean, those days they were able to order books by post, and they would get these list of book lists from various publishing houses, booksellers, and he would go through them, and he spent enormous amounts of money importing all these English books on literature, on religion, on art, on health, on mesmerism, on every subject, right? Living in Madras at the time, it was sort of the cultural heart of Tamil Nadu, and a very British colonial culture was prevalent there. And I mean, from his writing, you can see it's very anglicized, much of his life. And before embarking on any writing in Tamil, he would be reading all these, be it Caldwell, be it some European philosopher. He was very fond of William James, the philosopher William James. He was reading the writings of theosophists, a lot of the Indian nationalist figures as well. Tilak, for example. So he read mostly in English. I don't know when I think he did a lot of the Tamil reading in his early days. So perhaps he relied a lot, and as he says, that he would prefer the English method of commentary writing, of poetry, as opposed to the medieval Brahminical writers, commentators. So he was actively seeking the English method of literary criticism as the best tool to have a rational understanding of the ancient Tamil literature. And in this, he's kind of following in the footsteps of Sundaram Pillai. Sundaram Pillai was, compared to Maraimalai Adigal, highly educated in the English system, right? He finished his BA, he had an MA, he was highly regarded, he was well versed in European philosophy. Maraimalai Adigal had to learn it for himself. And yet, I mean, he managed to read on his own a lot of the European philosophical traditions, which very much influenced the kind of construction of Tamil Saivam, or interpretation of Tamil Saivam and Tamil tradition that he came to write, very much in the fashion of English writers. And that's something that is lost in much of the Tamil biographies of Maraimalai Adigal, that he's portrayed as some kind of born in the soil, steeped in the, but basically he was very much and his habits and customs as well, right? He would prefer to sit on sofas rather than the typical Tamil pundits.
And listen to gramophone. Yeah, there are pictures of gramophone in your book also.
And I mean, his son Tirunavukarasu describes, a meeting with Panditurai Devar, the Raja Panditurai Devar, and he was saying that unlike the Tamil Pandits, he had pants, boots. He was wearing boots, pants, and he had that tunic that many of the upper middle class people used to wear at that time, like a coat suit kind of thing, and a turban, right? Which many of the higher classes, and so his own son Marai Tirunavukarasu is lengthy biography. He talks about what a contrast he offered to the typical Tamil pundits of the time, who would stand with their arms folded in front of the king or in front of the Panditurai Devar. He was sitting in a sofa, almost reclining with his legs crossed, which is shows the kind of person he was, right? And how he presented himself. But then, he also started wearing the robe of a sannyasi from about 1911 onwards. But that didn't slow down his taste for European books and knowledge, because that's what he sought as a tool to fight Brahmanism and the Sanskrit hegemony in Tamil, as far as he was concerned.
So, I mean, it's already more than 2 hours.
And one thing I want to add, I mean, in terms of sources and those diaries that were so useful to me, was preserved by the Maraimalai Adigal Noolagam at that time, and after the director of Siddhanta, the publishing house, passed away, Mr. Kumarsamy, it is taken care of by his son, and I think it's a very some of it has been now taken over by the government as part of the it's been nationalized, but I don't know what is happening to the diaries, and I think that as a historian, I think it's a very valuable treasure for any genuine historian or scholar in Tamil Nadu, because it contains a lot of information about figures at the time and basically Adigal's own thinking at the time. So it's a very important source, and I hope it's preserved.
Thanks a lot, sir, again for a detailed answer on your sources and how Maraimalai Adigal's general life is, and and what all he recorded and why he recorded in English. Almost scandalous in a sense. So thanks again for joining us today. It's been almost 2 hours 19 minutes, longer than a movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we initially planned for an hour, but then it went on to 1 hour 15 minutes, 1.5 hours, and then we also didn't notice the time until it was 2 hours. And then we thank you very much for your time, and then for the wonderful book. And almost we didn't cover about a lot actually. His views, his relationship with nationalists, his views on gender, how he viewed these things. We had a lot of questions planned actually, but since it's already to us, we thought that this is the right point to stop at. And on behalf of Pagir and on behalf of us, we genuinely thank you for coming and sharing your wonderful views with us. And it's been a very fruitful interview. And we as a PhD students have also learned a lot, on how to do research and how to innovatively use theories and all that. And for the audience who are viewing this, so this is a part of an ongoing series, and in next week we are planning to discuss work of Bernard Bate, myself, and Arun. And after that there will be a short talk on Vallalar, Ramalinga Swami, whom we have discussed today also. So this is a part of a continuing series, and thank you all, and thanks a lot, Professor Ravi Vaithees.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, sir. It gave us a lot of clarity, actually. It gave us a lot of clarity on early 20th century, on the entire Neo-Saivite movement. And now I think I should go back to your book again to read it with this additional
Yeah,
clarity.
definitely,
Yeah, I
definitely.
think
Yeah, and the book
it's
is
the most.
available, and the Tamil work is also available. Yeah, for those who are looking for it.
Yeah, the
I'll,
Tamil book, I think, I think people are not that. Can you show it again so that
Navina
the
Tamilagam, Tamil Adayal.
right?
I'll put on the link also in the description.
Mhm.
I'll end the recording, but
Technical.
1 second.
Okay.